Jai Hind, doston. Good morning, everyone. We are extremely honored and privileged to have with us a very, very special guest, someone who his journey has been extremely inspirational and illustrious at the same time. Yes, none other than Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee. Now, let me tell you a bit, though you all know her, you all have seen her often or giving, speaking her voice, the most from her heart, and she speaks her mind completely. You've seen her almost on all television, national television channels. She lectures at at various universities in India and abroad. And she has been ambassador to Netherlands from 2010 to 2013. She joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1976, and she's had an illustrious journey thereafter. She's also been a permanent delegate at the UNESCO. We will talk about all that. I have been extremely fortunate and I consider myself very lucky to have been on panels with ma'am, debates on national television, and I have learned from watching Ambassador Mukherjee each time she speaks, and I am totally in awe. Ma'am, thank you very much for sparing time and thank you very much. And yes, of course, we will talk about your publication in 2018. You published between India and Europe, and we will talk about that as well, ma'am. There's a lot to converse with you, and there's a lot to catch up with you, in fact. And I'm sure a lot of people would be really interested and intrigued to know about your journey. And of course, you had the best of education, right from Convent of Jesus Mary's to Miranda House, which is what a journey. Ma'am, thank you very much and welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure, and I'll be happy to share my journey or anything else you wish to talk about. I just wanted to add that in 2018, my book on India and the EU and Insider Perspective came out. But last year, my third book, which is on Bengal and its partition, an untold story by Rupa, was published in. It was delayed because of the lockdown. It came out in April, and it is a bestseller. It talks about what happened in Bengal, why did it get partitioned, and who is the victim? Uh, is it the people of Bengal? Were we manipulated, or was there some other story behind it? So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. We would really, and in fact, I would love to catch this book straight away after our conversation over here, ma'am. Let's talk about your school days. When you were in CJM, was it always your ambition to join the foreign services or the government services or be a diplomat or a bureaucrat? Or unlike many other girls girls, they aspire that, oh, I would be a school teacher or I would be an air hostess or they would chase glamour or. So what was your ambition growing up in your growing up years, ma'am?
Well, my father was a civil servant, and salaries of civil servants in those days were very, very low. I was always very much aware, since there were no boys in the family, that I would like to be a support to my parents. And I wanted to emulate my father. And I had this burning passion to represent my country and to do something for India. I think I was always a very nationalistic person in my approach, even as a kid. And I had this great love for travel, and that was impossible in a family which is balancing its budget for even buying tomatoes and onions. So all in all, I from a very early age, I decided that I wanted to be in the foreign service. There were many who tried to dissuade me, saying, I'm a girl, it's not a career for a girl, it interferes with your personal life. Why don't you be more reasonable and opt for something easier like the IS? But I was very set, and in fact, when I gave my option for the civil service exam in 1975, I wrote Indian Foreign Service and no other service at all, and that caused quite a stir because when the results came out first for the IS, my name was not there, and so everyone thought that I had failed. And then the
Okay.
results came out for the Foreign Service, and I was fifth. And so everyone said, how is it possible that your name is in the Foreign Service list and not on the IS list? I said, because I only opted for the Foreign Service. They said, wasn't it very ambitious of you? I said, yes, it was very ambitious, but it paid off first shot. So that's how my journey began.
Oh, super, ma'am, super. But always that teaches us a lesson. Always think big in life. Never think that something is impossible. Even if people try to dissuade you and tell you where you have to reach.
Very true.
Where you have to reach. Um, as they say that traveling is the best education. In fact, like there's a difference between literacy and education. Of course, you had the best of literacy as well and the best of education as well. So you could say can say best of the two combined, and that is what we can see over here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my dear friends. We can see Ambassador Mukherjee as an epitome of success and as an epitome of an example for everyone, for every not just girl, every child, every youngster, everyone who aspires and everyone who dreams big, and no one can stop you from reaching where you want to go. When you joined the foreign services, were there any challenges that you had to face being a lady, or it was a smooth sailing throughout?
Well, I've written extensively on this and blogged on it. You can see it on YouTube. It's called Journey of an Indian Woman. And yes, there were many challenges. The greatest challenge being that growing up in post independence India, in a middle class Bengali family, I was completely unused to handling everything on my own. And when I was sent on my first posting to Paris with two trunks and 20 US dollars, that's all I had. I suddenly found myself in an apartment in Paris. I didn't know the language. I didn't have any friends. There was no mobile phone, no connectivity. It was a very challenging situation. Moreover, I had just learned how to drive a car in India. I was a beginner. And then to start to learn how to drive a car in Paris, which is a challenge even for the French, was a much greater challenge for somebody like me who was living all alone with no support system at all. But yes, I took it as a challenge. I taught myself to drive. I taught myself to cook. I taught myself to speak very good French. And I took every challenge on the chin and told myself that never ever will I ask for any accommodation because I'm a woman, because I joined this service on an equal basis, and I will take every challenge as an officer, not as a woman. And till the day I retired, I was a foreign service officer, not a woman officer. I never called myself a woman officer. I suppose it must be the same thing for women who join the armed forces. They should call themselves officers, not women officers. That's what I feel.
Ma'am, superb, ma'am. I had heard of this. I've heard you speak on this on YouTube, and I've read of this in your blog as well. I wanted this message once again to our people, our audience who are viewing us and who would be viewing us, who will be sharing this link further, to actually hear it straight from you that that yes is an example that when like my commanding officer, for example, he never discriminated between me or as you rightly said, it should be an officer, not a lady officer. In fact, they were tasked which an officer who happens to be a lady could do better than me. Then that is why the commanding officer had given her the task. And it was in fact, I had proposed the idea way back in 2008 that why can I had come to Delhi to lead the Assam Rifles marching contingent for the Republic Day parade, ma'am. And that's the time from the Chief of Army Staff's residence. I was doing the commentary there, and we had the Prime Minister, President, Defense Minister, and the top brass was then I announced on the from the treetop that we should have a lady commanding the parade. And ultimately, they say whatever you manifest comes true. In the year 2019, it so did happen. We had a lady officer commanding the parade and traveled to various countries. I mean, the list is countless. I was trying to actually list it out, but it was beyond. I think I would have spent the entire time. So tell us a few anecdotes of of a few countries which you found very very interesting. But before we come to that, ma'am, I had planned to introduce you. While introducing, I had planned to say bonjour or talez-vous to you. I learned it specifically to you because I know you've done a course in French and you speak fluent French and you are good at that. But then somehow that slipped my mind. So, ma'am, tell us something about some interesting anecdotes of any of the countries that you had been to that which any of our viewers would like to know. In fact.
There have been so many interesting anecdotes. Let me begin with Paris, France, where we had a change of guard when, for the first time, President Mitterrand took over. And what was very interesting is that he had promised that he would abolish the death penalty, the guillotine. And there was one man waiting to be guillotined, and fortunately for him, he's a lucky man. The presidential election came in, and the guillotine was abolished. He got life imprisonment, and then he married his lady lawyer. It's a very romantic story I've never forgotten. And I still remember the French celebrating Mitterrand's victory. on the Place de la Concorde by standing on the roofs of their cars and drinking champagne as a very young officer I had gone there to see. And I also ended up drinking a lot of champagne with them and coming back and getting a very bad hangover the next day. So that was very exciting. Another exciting incident was when I was posted to Cairo and Sadat had just been assassinated. This was a very turbulent time in the Middle East. And I still remember that at that point of time, those who had murdered Sheikh Mujib, two of them were posted in the Bangladesh embassy. And I refused to ever acknowledge them because I have to look at them and think that these are murderers and they have been posted here as second secretaries in the Bangladesh High Commission. And how is that possible? Well, everything is possible in politics. Later on, of course, their luck ran out and they were taken back to Dhaka, and I think they've been executed. So these are little snippets in my life. I went to Geneva and worked for 6 years for the UN on human rights. That again was very challenging, coming from a foreign service job into the UN Secretariat, where they look at you askance if you're what they call think you're a babu. I had to adjust my life, and that is where I really beefed up my French. I have interpreter level French, and my boss was francophone, black, African. I learned so much from him. I learned so much about the racism that is inherent in Europe against black people at that time. And I learned a little bit also about Africa because coming from India, we know so little about Africa. And when I became a member of his extended African family, which I still am, I was so proud of the fact that he had taken me into his family because honestly, in India too, there is so much we don't know or appreciate about Black people. So these are just a few snippets since we don't have so much of time. But it's been a very interesting life. I was posted in New York when Gorbachev came, and it was called Gorby fever. I was in the UN General Assembly. There was no place to stand. There was no mic, no interpretation. He was speaking in Russian, but you could feel the man's presence, and you could feel through him the changes that would come in Europe, because Gorbachev, although he was never appreciated in his own country, Gorbachev orchestrated one of the greatest changes in the world post World War II, and it was fascinating to see him so close, and to hear what he's saying. You didn't need to know the language to understand that it was a very, very emotional speech which he delivered. And I've never been able to understand why a man who was so important outside Russia was never popular inside Russia. But that's one of the tragedies of history.
Very true, ma'am. Ma'am, my wife is doing her PhD in French. I had just finished my short service commission from the army and I had joined a theatre group. This theatre group was going to Paris, incidentally, to perform a play. And the director of the play, he had also learned a few words, like the way I picked up, to learn to speak with you, Bonjour and Mohammed Ali. So, but just when he was stepping on stage, he forgot how to address ladies and gentlemen in French. So this guy, this director, this friend of mine, very dear friend of mine, he went rushing towards the washroom. Outside the auditorium, there are washrooms. So since French script is very similar to English script, it's like English, like
It's very similar, but it's
Arabic and Urdu or Sanskrit and Hindi. So
it's very similar and very dissimilar. So if you try to
very
read it with your English tinted glasses, you will end up making a complete fool of yourself. That's the danger of speaking French from an English perspective. Yeah.
Ma'am, you said it. You said it. You stole words from my mouth, and that's what exactly I'm coming at. So this gentleman goes outside the auditorium and reads their toilets, their washrooms, there, no, kings and queens, ladies and gents. So
Monsieur Nam,
he reads
Monsieur Nam,
yeah,
Monsieur.
yes, that's right. So he reads ladies and gents, and he memorized that in English as per the script. And he comes on stage very confidently and says, "Bonjour, comment allez-vous?" And then he says, "Good evening, ladies' toilets and gents' toilets." That's exactly as what you said. You will end up making a complete fool out of yourself if you haven't read. So, ma'am, so you must have had various association with defense attaches in the various embassies that you have been to as well. Because my father also was a defense attache in the mid 90s, and he was in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Yemen when Mr. Hamid Ansari, the former vice president, was the Indian ambassador there. So tell us about your association with the defense attaches. I particularly am very intrigued and interested in knowing this because I have personally seen like the life of a defense attaché and of a diplomat closely. So, how was your association at that time on the cooperation and the synergy with the defense attaché while you were working with them?
Well, my first association was extremely interesting in Paris because the naval attaché who was posted there had lost his children to that horrendous murder case, which Billa Ranga case, and they had been sent there. And I used to spend a lot of time, particularly with his wife, who was so devastated by this terrible tragedy. They lost their children. Then I got very close to the military attaché there and his wife. I won't give any names. And many years later, when I found that he's been arrested for corruption in deals, big deals, which were going on at that time in my on my first posting, 79, 70, November 78 onwards, I was really surprised. And later on, I thought that one of the problems that military attaches had in those days is that they were very poorly paid and their dependents didn't have um, free medical treatment. And I remember in the case of this very, very nice military attache uh, who didn't come to a good end, his mother in law had fallen very sick and he was really distraught trying to pay for her medical expenses. So while I'm not excusing what they did, it always had a deep impact on me, thinking that maybe the circumstances in which he found himself conditioned him to do what he shouldn't have done. Later on, when I was in Netherlands as ambassador, we had the most wonderful attaches who were attached to us from Paris. They used to the military attaches bring so much of dignity to a National Day function, and every National Day function that I've organized, either the air or the military attaché was there, and I used to always tell them that you feel so proud of having a man in uniform standing next to you when you're the ambassador, because that is what it's all about, the defense of the country through our armed forces and the defense of the country externally through the foreign service. You can't have a better partnership.
That's super, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. But I remember when my parents went to Saudi Arabia. That time, of course, army officers at that earlier were not the salaries were not very
Not
good,
very.
but it was enough to be comfortable. And we were four siblings, and raising all four siblings, being in from an army background, they had a tough time. So I've seen my parents really sacrifice a lot. But all the worries were solved when he went as defense attaché because now he was getting a salary in reals, which was
Yeah.
10 times of Indian rupees. So that is how my sister and I we both could go to boarding schools in Ooty. That is how we could really have a good upbringing, man. Ma'am,
Very
also
true.
tell us about your stint as the ambassador. I mean, it is a royal existence actually as an ambassador. It is. I have seen it is totally royal. I mean, it is. You are always made much about, and it is, and rightly so. You are representing the country there. So tell us about your stint as the ambassador when you were appointed. How was it? Netherlands that you were actually looking at secretly in your heart, or it was some other country, or perhaps, and how was it? How was your reaction when it was announced, when it was declared that you are going as the ambassador to Netherlands?
I was very happy to go to Netherlands. It was a very fine place to go to. I had always wanted to be bilateral ambassador to France because of my French and because of my connections, because having been Director General for Europe. But I always remembered what my father told me. He said that what you don't get is not good for you. What you get is good for you. And I went to Netherlands with that spirit. The Dutch were incredibly nice to me. The ambassador's residence had a 12-acre garden, and the house is larger than what we call 9 kpg, which is the High Commissioner's residence in London. But it's a huge responsibility when you're a single woman going with a housekeeper and a dog alone to Netherlands, because you have a big embassy, more than 55 people, and you are the boss, but you have to be very careful not to show any weakness in public, because any weakness from a woman ambassador, single on top of that, is immediately pounced upon. So that's pretty stressful. You can't have a private life. You cannot ever let your guard fall. You have to be always conscious that you are representing your country. and the only time that you are free to be what you are is when you're inside that palatial residence with your housekeeper and your dog. So it's quite challenging, but it was a very enjoyable experience for me. I can tell you one thing about my posting there, which is that when I was there, this again the horrible Nirbhaya episode happened. I woke up in the morning and my security guard told me, "Ki, madam, today is not National Day, but people have left so many flowers at your gate." So I said, "That's very strange." And I went there and I found that they had written condolences, sympathies, because they were horrified that a woman has been treated in this manner. And they were so sympathetic that I'm a woman. How it must be so dangerous for me to be in India as a woman. So then I took the permission of the then External Affairs Minister for the Congress government, and I took his permission to go live on Dutch television. And I've written about it in my blog. And I explained that Nirbhaya was horrible, but Nirbhaya cannot be painted to mean that the whole of Indian society or all Indian men are like that. This was something which happened, which shouldn't have happened. There were complex reasons why it happened. But India is a perfectly safe place. Indian women are perfectly safe. And I, as the Indian ambassador in Netherlands, represent that safety of Indian women in India. And after what I said on TV, and a lot of my peer group said, "Be careful, they will catch you." Not at all. There was in Netherlands, in the media, there was nothing written about Nirbhaya which could have hurt any Indian's feelings because I had set the record straight. I opened a condolence book in the embassy with the approval of our foreign minister at that time. People came. I used to meet them at lunchtime. I used to talk to them about my life. They went away reassured. So, in my opinion, when you're an ambassador, if there is an incident like this, or there's an incident which could portray India in a bad light, don't be negative or hypersensitive about it. These are people who don't know India. You have to go there and explain to them what is India, what is Indian society, what is the caste system, what is child labor. You have to explain everything to them, and you have to also make them understand that it's a democracy and we never said that we are perfect. We just do our best like they do. And usually people who are democratic, like the Dutch are, they understand. They said, "Madam Ambassador, we also have problems in our own country. But we are glad that you've come and explained it to us. Now we understand what happened." So that is just a snippet again of my life as an ambassador in the Netherlands.
Ma'am, I must congratulate you firstly, to have the courage and to take permission and to take the initiative of going live and speaking to the television, the national television, in fact, and the world, to the international media, and telling them and clarifying certain things, certain norms. Because normally what happens is one tends to shy away from such incidents and one tends to not speak against on it. They no, no, no. If a news channel is calling you up, don't take the call, keep avoid the media and such things. No, without realizing that causes a further damage, that causes a further preconceived notion, a further perception about things. The best way is hold the bull by its horns and clear the air the way you did, ma'am. I must congratulate you on that. And in fact, it really requires a lot of courage for that, ma'am. Really,
Thank you very much. It was risky what
I
I
admire
did.
the way you. Thank you, ma'am. That is very, very kind of you to, and very, very humble of you to think and say that, ma'am. And after your post-retirement from the foreign services, now you teach at the Foreign Services Institute. You train people. You also give lectures. You world over. In fact, you speak on various forums. In fact, you have been an active member of the part of the you were the chief of staff of the Human Rights organization. In fact, so I have dealt with. In fact, we have being in the armed forces. I have had active counterinsurgency operations in Jammu Kashmir and in Northeast, and there are several times we have been taught, we have been trained that whenever you are going for a such operation, be extremely careful not to even touch anyone slightly, or even put your hand on someone's arm. That listen, dost, friend, come and tell me. No, because a human rights case can come against you on that, man. So tell us a bit about throw some light on the human rights issues that have happened and that.
So the first thing is that when I was posted in New York as a young first secretary, I persuaded my boss, who was a very great person, who is a great person, he's very much around, that we should change our policy towards Amnesty International, and we should respond to every allegation, false or sometimes they are false, sometimes they're correct. We should respond as a responsible country and reply to everything, because otherwise they publish their allegations without the government's response. And I told them that to me that was very damaging. You There is no point in saying that these are people who are up after us. It's true, but we have to learn as a nation, and it's difficult when you've been colonized for 180 years. We have to develop a thicker skin and learn to engage, because if we don't learn how to engage, the wrong version will be published about you. So that was the first thing we did. When I was in Geneva, it was a very difficult time. Yes, I was chief of staff to the boss. I was an Indian diplomat on top of that, and never had the India Pakistan relations been worse. And I was there when Bajpai Saab was leader of the opposition. He came to head the Indian delegation. Farooq Abdullah Saab was with him. The Pakistanis had tried to bring a resolution against us on human rights violations in Kashmir, and that resolution was defeated. It was a great moment of victory, and I can never forget the manner in which, at that time and age, the opposition of the day, that's Bajpai Saab, Farooq Abdullah Saab, etc., the way they supported the government of the day. That is something that is lacking now. I think it is very important that on matters relating to national security in a democracy, government and opposition should speak with one voice. Because if opposition starts bashing government outside India, the damage is catastrophic. And I have seen for myself what happens when they don't do that. When they don't do that, the country emerges greater. So, yes, these are challenges. And yes, you're right about not touching. That's another very important thing which Indians need to understand, which is not just about in the context of Kashmir, but in men women relationships in an office now. It was not like in my time. One has to be very careful as a male how you address a woman, how you behave with her, etc., because now women are much more conscious of their rights. We were conscious of our rights, but very often we could not exercise them because the societal support was not there. But now it is there. So it's not just a question of human rights. It's also a question of being more sensitive to what the other side expects from you. And once that has been established, I think things do get easier.
Absolutely, ma'am. Very well. Ma'am, tell us about your publications. You have authored three books, and yes, they all done exceedingly well, and all three are bestsellers, especially the one that you wrote last year, in fact. So, I think your first publication, you starting from your first publication, how did the thought of writing a book? I know for a fact it's not easy when you write a book. I've seen my father writing his book with autobiography, and it took him years of thinking, months of burning the midnight oil, and months of concentrating your focus on writing this book, and then draft and redraft and then sending it further, and then finally ultimately getting down to publishing it. It is a challenge. And so tell us about your first time when you were actually putting down the book to your third book, ma'am.
You're absolutely right. I wanted to reinvent myself. Having been 39 years as a diplomat, my writing style had become constrained, but I was extremely good in writing in college. I was the first woman to be recruited to teach history in St. Stephen's College when it went co-ed in 75. And if I had not got foreign service, I would have gone into academia. So I wanted to reinvent myself. And it took me 3, 4 months to get rid of the Sarkari style of writing, which is very good when you are in Sarkar and is terrible when you leave it. I got the idea of writing about the India and the European Union because I had been Joint Secretary Europe West for the longest time ever in the Foreign Service. That's 5.5 years, and I speak fluent French, and I could see the problem of the relationship from the perspective of India and the perspective of the EU. So I thought it was time to write a book from both perspectives to see whether these differences can be ironed out and these two great strategic partners can move forward. The book was a great success. I took a lot of help actually from the then EU ambassador, from the French ambassador. I took a lot of help from sources, and I learned for the first time how to handle a computer properly because I'd always had three secretaries to work for me. So I had to again teach myself how to learn, to type, to research, to do everything. It was difficult, but I never regretted it. It helped me to reinvent myself. The next book was India and You in a Turbulent World. That was, I contributed two strategic essays on India, You, human rights, and that was a big hit. And India, You and counterterrorism, again a big hit. My third book, which was really a cry from my heart, is the Story of Bengal from 1757. The chapter says when Bengal was sold to the British, that Battle of Plassey, Robert Clive. Up till 1947, the destruction of what I call Bengal's syncretic culture, where Hindus and Muslims had lived together for so long, and suddenly you had the poison grapes of communalism. And how did it happen? Why did we fall victim? Was it something wrong with us Bengalis? Were we manipulated? Was the Bhadralok responsible? Was Jinnah responsible? Or was it the British and their Machiavellian ways of manipulating and dividing and partitioning and leaving? You have to read the book to understand where the final message comes from. But do read it, Bengal and its Partition, An Untold Story by Rupa. It's trending 5 stars on Amazon, but I promise you, you'll enjoy it. It's been picked up by people all over the world because it's true that in the Indian context, there was too much emphasis on the partition in Punjab, but hardly anything written substantively about the tragedy of the East. I thought that needed, since you came from Assam Rifles, you would understand. It's also very important for us to understand what happened in our East and why it should never have been allowed to happen. So that's why I wrote the book. And now I'm writing my next book, which is again a very interesting subject. It's on indenture, the Girmitya route, the how Indians, after slavery was abolished in 1868, how they became once again victims. Why are we always victims? We became victims to indenture. 1.5 million Indians were shipped out all over the world to work on the plantations, and how ultimately they overcame and became part of the great, glorious Indian diaspora. But their story is tragic and needs to be written, and I'm right in the middle of writing that book. So that's my fourth book, which I'm writing.
Man, that is superb, man. That is superb. And all three books of yours are available on Flipkart and Amazon online if you wish to order. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be ordering my copy right away. In fact, immediately after this, and I will read it and I buy. And I hope, and with Amazon and Flipkart, they deliver very fast. Within a day or two or three at the most, it's delivered to you. So all the people who are listening to us, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my dear friends, that the first thing you should do, and trust you me, I can vouch for the fact that the way ma'am speaks, her thought process is so sorted that you will enjoy reading this book. I haven't read it and I feel guilty about it. I'm rather embarrassed, I would say. I wish I had read the book before speaking with you. In fact, but I read a lot about you. In fact, I went through a whole lot. Apart from these books, that is my embarrassment, but that's the first thing I'm going to be doing. Ma'am, a little bit
Thank you so much.
before we let you go, ma'am, a little bit about your life journey has been extremely good. So I would say your schooling at CGM or your college or your graduation years at Miranda House. Any fond memories you have of your youth, of your childhood, which actually made a big impact on your life overall?
Well, my schooling in CGM was very, very, very interesting. I made some very dear friends who are still there with me. We were brought up by Irish Catholic nuns who were very strict, um, and we were given an upbringing which was very, very conservative. I only started understanding about life and about myself as a woman and my future after I joined Miranda House. Miranda House in those days was a college which women like me found a niche. I got into student politics. We abolished the Miss Miranda beauty contest because we said that we don't want women being judged for beauty but for their brains. Um, the training which Miranda House gave me in my formative years and Delhi University, because we had the most amazing professors of history. I'm an outstanding student of history. Uh, I have never forgotten those formative years. It was Miranda House and Delhi University which really shaped me. Yes, the most interesting part was getting into student politics. Then we had the emergency. Um, so it was all boiling down to that. because I post graduated in 75, got into Stephens, wrote the exam, and in 76 I joined the Foreign Service. We were called the batch of the emergency. We went into Mussoorie. My late father, told me, "Be very careful. Don't tell anyone you were in politics. Don't be progressive. Keep your mouth shut. There's no need to discuss anything." I told him. I said, "Is that part of being a civil servant?" He said, "No, it's the emergency. So just learn to keep your mouth shut." Well, I did that. And I realized when I went to Mussoorie that the old man, my father, was spot on. There were so many informers around looking at people, trying to see what their political views were. Fortunately, that didn't last for long. We had the end of the emergency and we never looked back. But yes, we were the 76 batch civil service, foreign service was called the batch of the emergency because it was the emergency when we went. So those were, yes, those were formative years. And it was Random House and Delhi University that made me what I am. I'm very proud of being from Delhi University and from being from Miranda House. Yeah.
Very nice of you to say, ma'am. And I'm sure your CGM and St. Stephen and Merenhout and DU, in fact, they would be very, very proud of having such an illustrious alumni like you, ma'am. Ma'am, and also when you were at the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy in Mussoorie, we have a house in Mussoorie. In fact, we are almost neighbors with the academy, in fact. And my parents had gone there just before the pandemic. My father delivered a lecture over there. So, in fact, the Mall Road, Kuladi, Lahore, the entire, I can say, Connect Library, in fact, in Mussoorie, yes, ma'am. Any message you would like to give to our youth who wish to join the IFS, but they feel censorship in a way that, I would not be able to crack the IFS exam, or let me think of something else, let me search something else. Any message for a youth which you would like to give?
Well, my concluding message, I conclude with what you said in the beginning, which is think big and you will achieve it. And secondly, always remember there is no easy road to knowledge. To come from ignorance to enlightenment, you have to go through that long and painful path of acquiring knowledge. As I realized when I retired and made myself into an author, to acquire knowledge, you have to sweat, you have to read, you have to learn, and only then you can crack the exam. In my case, I cracked the exam in 3 months. But I worked, studied night and day for that because I knew a lot of people who studied 2, 3 years and to get through. But I couldn't afford it. My father had just retired. Pension was very small. And I knew that there was a huge burden on me to get through. So when you think big and you follow it up with very, very hard work. And remember that to get enlightenment, like Buddha did, you have to seep yourself into the process of dispelling your ignorance. There is no easy road to enlightenment. That's my final message. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for taking your time. Really grateful to you and really appreciate.
It's a pleasure.
I
And
talk में इसमें 4 चांद लग गए, ma'am. शुक्रिया बहुत बहुत. Thank you very
thank
much, ma'am.
you. Bye.
Stay safe. Have a nice day, ma'am. I'll just end the broadcast live, and I would just